Avner Baruch. I'm the founder and author of Project Moneyball book series. I'm here with Marcus in the Inquisitor podcast, and we're going to have uncomfortable conversations around go-to-market. What does it take to scale a business, and what does it take to find out what works, what doesn't work? Join us as we delve into uncomfortable conversations around those topics.
Welcome back to the Inquisitor podcast with me, Marcus Kauke. Today, my guest is Avner Baruch. Avner and I are allies. We've been working on and off together for 5-6 years, and he works in the area of enablement. And one of the things I really like about him, and I'd put him in the same category as the likes of Rod Jefferson, is they put the human first. It's not just about the result. So without any further ado, what I'd like to do is have Avner introduce his story, and then we'll get into some really meaty and uncomfortable questions that will hopefully shake your thinking and give you another perspective that will allow you to deal with the things that keep coming back to bite you. And every time you throw money or effort at it, the problem just doesn't go away. So, Avner, welcome.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm happy to be here again. Always a pleasure to be part of your podcasting program. To begin with, I'd like to share with everyone, a brief history of my career. I started wading into the sales and enablement and go-to-market space about 15 years ago when I got my first opportunity to join a early startup, and help leaders to put together a new sales organization. I didn't know much about enablement or sales, but I learned, on the fly, and I did a lot of mistakes, and I learned from those mistakes. As I was, trying to understand what does it take to enable, ramp up the sales organization, the entire go-to-market team, I learned that it takes more than just focusing on the traditional KPIs and sales training, etc. I've done that, the usual way, traditional way, and as I said before, I've gone through many mistakes. Long story short, 15 years later, I realized that in order to really help salespeople, you need to have some kind of a 3D presentation of what good looks like, and what are the areas that we need to improve on. Because in most cases, leaders, tier one, and even CROs, they just focus on flat numbers, ARRs. Money that reps are able to bring in, but it doesn't really explain why talents that you really struggle to bring to your system, for some reason, are not succeeding. They were able to succeed in previous jobs. But go ahead.
So when did you realize that the old way of focusing on the numbers wasn't working, but you said nothing and you lived with it for a while because you didn't know how to push back?
So I didn't realize that in the beginning because I was eager to learn what does it take in order to enable and to perform well as an enabler, as a trainer. But only when I moved on and acquired or assumed my second or third role as an enablement, and I was basically standing in front of 200 reps spread across 10 different offices, from Singapore, Australia to US and Europe, did I realize that I'm not excelling at my job. I'm not able to deliver on the promise, and I'm not understanding why some are doing better than others. Even though everyone has theoretically the same skills and the same entry level, what it takes in order to excel, but for some reason some are doing better, and I struggled to understand the whys. Why X is doing better than Y? Why is certain region doing better than other regions? I wasn't able to understand whether it's it comes down to the human factor, or is it because lack of playbooks, traditional thinking. It's all about the collateral, the playbooks, the product marketing stuff. I wasn't able to realize what does it take to really help my team to succeed. And I took a very brave decision to start to embark on a project and to go beyond the traditional win-loss analysis. And I then, at that time, I used Gong, relied mainly on Gong in order to understand what works, what doesn't work, but not from the traditional selling skills point of view, but from soft skills point of view. I wanted to understand what do those reps do differently than others in terms of time management, even body language, preparing for any type of engagement. Do some reps do better in terms of preparation, or do they improvise on the call? When do they bring in the sales engineer? If they rely on the sales engineer, maybe they work as a one-man show and they do the entire magic all by themselves. Are they able to do that? What works? What doesn't work? Again, from soft skills, time management, go-to-market adoption, sales readiness, things that don't appear on those radars, specifically on those sales radars. And again, only I think 7-10 years into the job of a sales enablement manager did I realize that I need to put together this 3D presentation of what works, what doesn't work. And since then, I just improved and excelled this methodology, which I call Moneyball.
Okay, so obviously the inspiration for that was the film. What is it that you make possible that is impossible by looking at it through the normal lens and the normal dashboards and normal KPIs?
Love the question. So in the old days, I'm talking about pre-COVID, when used to call that as growth at all cost. You could actually, you as a leader, as a business, you could tolerate, you could afford long time to value, long time to decision. You could afford waiting a quarter, maybe even 2 quarters. That used to be the usual time to understand whether we have a problem or not. Managers, leaders relied mainly on those traditional reports, and they would have this idea of Pareto, what defines top players, A players, and what defines the core players, B players. And I think that today, no one can actually tolerate this system. No one can actually wait a quarter, even a month, to understand whether we have a problem or not. And I think that what businesses need to do is to come up with real-time systems that allows them to understand whether they have a problem or not much earlier in the process, even during onboarding.
I would go further, and it needs to be in the design of your outreach, your attraction process, your building the bench, your role design,
Hiring.
and making sure that the roles are built for the job that they are intended to execute and the part that they play as an element within a component that is connected to other elements and components that form your system. So
totally agree, by the way, and I can give some specific use cases and examples why you're so right and spot on.
I would love you to. What I would love you to do, though, is I would love you to filter it through the beliefs that leadership need to unlearn in order to make this possible.
So let's take an example, a business that has a one-to-many go-to-market approach, meaning you've got a great product. This product can address multiple use cases or sectors or industries. So you can sell this product to the pharma industry, of course, sales, CRM, fintech, insurance, whatever it is. It's a one-to-many relationship. And what you do from a leadership point of view, you think that, you basically, if you bring in talents, people that were able to close or overperform in their previous jobs, once they join your company, it's just a matter of hit the ground and running. You don't need to spend too much time on onboarding and customizing the onboarding process. You're expecting results, very fast. And I've been around and I've seen that it doesn't necessarily work automatically by default.
Well, what's the fastest you've ever seen anyone ramp where they haven't done this thinking?
At least a quarter.
Okay, and are they then consistent and reliable in their performance?
No.
I'm sorry?
No, they're not.
Okay. Okay. So the rule is very simple. If the process is not empowering the human operator to perform to the standard you intend, then you're hard on the process. You don't start victimizing and bullying the people. Are you seeing the same patterns that I'm seeing, which is since Liberation Day and the collapse of the valuations and all that uncertainty, the constant disruption, the volatility, have you seen leadership make panic decisions that mean that they're now going to do the things that are going to compound later to bite them in the ass, such as firing people, trying to automate as much as possible, trying to put more at the top of the funnel, recruiting more SDRs so that they can fill more at the top of the funnel? Are you seeing this stuff happen?
I'm seeing a lot of this stuff happening, unfortunately, and I'm seeing many companies, early startups, collapsing, shutting down their business because of bad decisions. I'm not seeing panic decisions in terms of let's hire more people. On the other way around, I'm seeing panic decisions such as let's hire someone and change her role and definition on the fly, just to adapt to the situation, without actually equipping the salespeople with what it takes in order to adapt to the new role or new responsibilities. I'm seeing a lot of bad decisions, but not necessarily hiring more people.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. What are the numbers that people are still tracking that are hiding the real problem?
What do you mean by hot numbers? Sorry.
What are the metrics that people measure? Dialed, meetings, emails, where they are in the sales stages.
So to begin with, the usual stuff like conversion rates. How many, let's take SDRs, BDRs. How many meetings were they able to book? And for me, it doesn't mean a lot, because for some reason, reps can create an opportunity, even though, there's not a lot of meat on the bone. And then you find out later, like a week later, maybe a month later, that, this specific opportunity it was prone to close we're prone to lose that deal because of things that did not work well in the beginning of the journey. So I'm still seeing those mistakes, measuring SDR's performance by conversion, by booked meetings, which again, it's just looking at the surface without actually trying to understand what works from a qualification point of view. And that's like, the most common mistake I'm seeing.
I'm going to go further. That type of metric is actually lethal and damaging, because what it does is it delivers the outcome intended. It delivers a perfect result, which is meetings. it doesn't deliver the result that you want, which is the right meetings only with ICP who can become lifetime customers, and they are timely, or our approach is timely, relevant, and valuable, and we are a mutually good long-term fit.
Exactly.
So what that does is it creates a whole heap of dead work.
False positives, noisy pipeline.
With Moneyball, do you track what the cost of the drift is, and how it directly impacts EBIT, NRR, CAC, MOIC, all of those fun things?
Definitely. And, without sharing too much information, I can tell you that at one point, at one specific, job, in one of my previous jobs, I saved about $1 million just because of those inefficiencies. I'm talking about the top of funnel inefficiencies. I was able to save $1 million a year.
On a team of?
A team of 200 reps altogether, or a team of 15 SDRs.
Okay. And by creating that saving, what was the ripple effect in terms of time recovered?
So we could actually improve the process and make sure that, to begin with, let's take one step back. That inefficiency, that specific problem led to a situation where specific reps, top reps, starved to death. That situation led to starvation, lead starvation. As a result, the entire process didn't work well. You had A players going down from 10 meetings a week or 20 meetings a week to 1 or maybe 2. And if you consider the win rate of those A players being starved without any pipeline generated, you can actually evaluate the impact on the business.
Fascinating. Okay, so how does misalignment and siloed operation affect the balance sheet, the valuation, and the exit?
I think it starts from the very beginning of the process. Let's talk about lead generation, or ICP. In most cases, I would even say 90%, even 95% of the cases that I've seen, marketing just come up with ICP, an idea of their ideal customer profile, segments, sectors, whatever it is, and then they try the usual stuff, trial and error. They start a campaign which might last a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 quarters, and that's like a long-term relationship with our buyers, which sales cannot afford today. We need faster results and more accurate results. That's the usual stuff. But it's been going on forever. Marketing relying on their own systems, mechanism, and an idea of what does the campaign need to look like. And what I've seen, and again, based on my Moneyball approach, what I've seen that work better is if you actually analyze what works best, what is the real ICP, starting from the end. And this is the area that most businesses fail to focus on. We've got gold data in the end of the process at the customer success book of business. They know best what an ideal customer is. They know who sticks around. They know what are the attributes of top contributors. What needs to happen is break down those attributes and feed it back to the top of funnel, to marketing. And then you've got a laser focused ICP that saves you a great deal of money in terms of campaigns, in terms of time to value, in terms of network, funnel. Everyone wins. So if you can actually improve, fine tune, calibrate your ICP based on information that you already have, but you're not using, book of business, then again, you narrow down the funnel, you improve the conversion rate, you go from quantity to quality, and then you've got, as a result, what I like to call sanitized pipeline. Salespeople work on specific leads that they have better chances of to convert, and more importantly, by the time those leads end up at customer success, you've got better chances of renewing and expanding the account.
Okay, so for a 200-person company with 15 SDRs, if you look at the cost of misalignment across sales, marketing, and customer success, because I think failing to include them is a massive strategic error, you're probably looking at $250,000 plus in salary waste just on SDR costs, and $2.25 million in lost or delayed pipeline from poor ICP targeting, noise, and friction, and another $450,000 in indirect costs in rework, in poor handover, morale drag, retraining, and having to replace talent.
You're right, but it's even more than that. There's, there are more costs, hidden costs that most businesses don't factor in, don't take into consideration.
And they compound.
Exactly. I'm referring to the sales experience. So if the process doesn't work, if the customer life cycle doesn't work, it starts with bad engagement, it starts with bad messaging, it starts with the wrong idea of ICP, it starts with the lack of skills, it starts with a bad definition of what SDRs, BDRs need to do. If they're just here to book meetings, your cost of acquisition goes, through the roof. You could actually replace that immediately with, AI or any simple form on your website. What's even worse, things that you need to consider is the impact on other potential buyers that, people talk from mouth to hear, or I forgot the expression in English, but it's about the leads that you're not actually generating, because people talk about the bad experience. People just, don't want to engage with your business because of the experience they're getting.
If anyone would like to calculate the simple cost of the real cost of a wrong hire, go onto my LinkedIn profile and look at my articles. And there's one on there specifically about that. And you can run the model through the AI with using your own numbers. It's quite a fair and accurate representation. But in an enterprise world, if you make a wrong hire of a salesperson, you will incur an ongoing cost of somewhere between 35 and 125 times salary in ripple effects. If you mishire the wrong manager, you can 5 to 8 times that, plus the recruitment and replacement costs. And if you mishire the CRO, who incidentally is the person who is easiest to model and replace with AI, just in case anyone was looking for a way to make a quick saving, then we need to start really thinking about the most important question, which no one is asking, which is, what if we don't ever start those negative ripple effects in the first place?
Exactly.
How do we just design those intelligently, lazily, out of our process?
So I think it takes, first of all, some effort in order to understand really what are we expecting the rep to do. I want to go back to one of your previous questions and use that example to address that specific scenario question. You're trying very hard to bring someone who's been outperforming others. He's been like a top performer over the last 3-5 years, 300% of his quota, whatever. Top performer, consistent performing performer. And then for some reason that specific person doesn't do well. Okay, he's not delivering on the promise. It takes longer to see some level of proficiency. Things don't work very well. And what I've seen throughout my 7 to 10 years, recent years, is that you tend to ignore some specific factors, such as that person was doing well because he was selling something that is extremely familiar with that specific niche or terminology, jargon. Is doing well selling like Monday or Salesforce into the sales space, and then we're asking that specific person to sell something that he's not familiar with. He's not familiar with the jargon. He's not familiar with the market. He's not familiar with the personas. He's not familiar with the ICP. He did well in previous jobs, but for some reason he's having hard times to adjust to the terminology. It doesn't have the right onboarding system. It doesn't have a buddy. It doesn't have what it takes in order to ramp up very fast in a matter of days or maybe a week to catch up with the jargon. And then there is a trial and error, and then everyone loses. And I've seen it too many times.
And the question we have to ask ourselves is, did we hire them that way, or did we make them that way?
I think it's both ways. We maybe build the wrong hiring system by not asking the right questions. And then when we did hire the person, we didn't build the right ecosystem, work environment to allow that person to ramp up effectively and efficiently and acquire the jargon, what it takes in order to deliver on the promise fast and accurately.
Well, there's another side to this as well, which is that in the hiring process, what people are failing to do is design the job around the outcomes that the person's meant to execute. What they tend to do is copy and paste the job description of the person they've just fired or who has left and failed. And then they wonder why they hire the same people over and over again. So this comes back to first principles, which is design using an intelligently lazy approach. How do I remove the fat, the fiction, the friction that creates dis-ease, that creates distraction, that creates uncertainty, that creates ambiguity, that creates resistance and hesitation? And how do I eliminate that completely by design?
That's a very good question. If, as a business, if you rely on HR to conduct the first engagements, in most cases you're likely to fail, or you're gonna have a very long hiring process, interviewing process with many false positives. And what's gonna happen later, it's a matter of setting the expectations with the recruit. And that's going to create a lot of overhead on the hiring manager, on the system, on the business, and a lot of frustration for the new people that join the business. What needs to happen, in my opinion, based on my experiencing, is for managers, especially sales managers, to begin the process themselves.
Yep.
I know it takes a lot of effort, and most sales managers don't have the capacity, even the skills, to conduct those early hiring engagements. But it has to happen. Sales managers need to be first. First they need to design the role in order to make sure that they achieve a good fit. I'll give you like a very basic example. Your business is SMB selling to SMBs. If you hire an enterprise rep, an experienced top performer, enterprise rep, and you're trying to make that person fit into an SMB go-to-market space, it's not going to work, and vice versa. So from a hiring manager point of view, you need to really design the system, you need to set the expectations, and you need to make sure that you hire the right person. Yeah, go ahead.
This then raises another question which I wanted to build on, which is when you're making internal hires and promotions. So a top performer being moved into a sales management role. It's the same process. You still need to design the job. You need to have a proper ramp and onboarding process, but you have the luxury of time. And what I see happen more often than not is the runway is someone getting tapped on the shoulder as they're scoffing their cornflakes or Weetabix first thing in the morning, and they're told, Avner, bad news, we fired your idiot boss. Congratulations, you're the idiot boss. And they then think that their job is to control and to manage. Managers only have 4 core functions, and if you don't do these 4 things well, your life will be a misery, and you will make the life of your people miserable, and you will struggle to hit quota. They are hire the best people, which means that hiring is your number 1 job. Nothing matters more than building your bench and ensuring that you have 5 to 7 people lined up, all of whom want the job, can do the job, are capable, willing, able, and competent, and they're a good cultural fit.
And coachable.
And coachable. Secondly, after hiring the best people, you have to protect them from acts of idiocy from above. You have to protect them from yourself and your senior leadership and your PE so that they can get on. And the third thing, which is critical, is you must create a system, a process, so they can do their best work every day. And then the final piece is that they need to learn to empower other people to make good decisions well, so they're no longer a bottleneck. If you design your managers and you train and coach your managers to do that job, then 99% of all the things you've just described never, ever happen in the first place.
I totally agree. And I'd like to take this opportunity to share something that one of my ex-managers told me, on day 1 when I joined that company. I still remember that it happened like 10 years ago. He said, my job as a manager is to make you a better version of yourself. And one day, maybe you can actually replace me. So my job is actually help you to get your next job.
Mm-hmm.
As a manager myself, I'm still using that mantra with my employees as well.
It's critical. Well, again, the root word of succession is success. Leaders create more leaders. They don't create followers. And this is where everything goes horribly wrong, because when you try and control, manage, coerce, when you try and convince, when you try and close, when you try and handle people, human beings do not respond well to any of that stuff. And we've institutionalized delay and loss in all of our playbooks because we use technique as a weapon, not a shield.
I couldn't agree more. And if I may add, in most cases, and I've seen this over the last 15 years, leaders bring in, the wrong person to help them. They don't have multipliers by their side. They have someone who's just, tick off boxes, managing content. I'm talking about the enablement job, and I've seen it too many times happening, across the board. SMBs, enterprise, corporate. Enablement doesn't serve or act as a multiplier. And it's all, I think, leaders' fault because they have the wrong idea of what enablements need to do. What's the real responsibility of enablement? I'm talking about revenue enablement, go-to-market enablement. And what happens in reality is that the early engagements of a sell cycle of the process are left behind. They are being ignored by managers. Managers only step in the later stages. And by the time they realize there is a problem, it's too late. They don't have those eyes and ears that basically tap into the process and understand what works, what doesn't work, and surface the reason we may have a problem. And you have, as a manager, you need to deal with those issues in the beginning of the journey, not at later stages when it's too late. And I've seen it too many times happening.
Well, again, this is where we see the most common problem and the biggest multiplier being wasted. There was a 2019 study done by the BEIS Department, Business, Enterprise, Industry, and something else, a government department, the London School of Economics, and a company that I was CRO of at the time called Notion. And the study looked at what's happened when managers change their their management style from one of control and coercion to one of operational coaching. So coaching in the moment, at the point of need, based on what they see and observe. The average documented return on investment in a gated learning process where they could only move to the next stage when they documented the advancements that they had made was 72x in 6 months.
Wow.
We ran another study pilot with another software company, $1 billion software company with only 35 managers. And we got a 423x return on investment in 6 months, documented and collected cash.
That proves the point that everyone needs a multiplier across the entire sales cycle, not just in later stages. Someone who tells you like, yeah, we're not doing good from an ARR point of view. It's too late.
Right. So this then comes back down to leadership and courage and vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Where leaders are failing to take ownership and they bring people like you and I in, what they're normally looking for is a way of deflecting responsibility, abdicating responsibility, and hiring a bully. Why doesn't that work? Can we just put a nail in that coffin very quickly?
I think that nobody likes, to be told what to do to begin with. Humans don't like to hear to other people. Most people don't like to get an advice from someone else. It's about ego, and it's about the fact that I did well in my previous job, so there's no reason why I shouldn't succeed now in my current job. And it's about not knowing what you don't know. Most leaders rely on those traditional tools and systems. They're being forced to meet very intense quota, top bottom from their managers. That leaves them very little capacity and bandwidth to consider other systems, other approaches. So I think overall there is a problem starting from top. You need to build a culture of feedback to begin with, and you need to have that culture implemented across the entire business. And that means that sometimes you need to slow down in order to realize what works, what doesn't work. And most businesses just don't have the mindset to slow the business down and to build a culture of feedback. I can tell you from a personal point of view, personal experience. One of the CROs I used to work for simply told me like, I don't want to hear things that don't work. Don't bother me. Don't waste my time with things that don't work. Just tell me what works. You don't need someone like me to tell you what works, what doesn't work, because you've got those reports on CRM. And I think that mindset is wrong and doesn't prove well in time to come.
Well, I think they're blind because the CRM isn't tracking what they need to track. Because at the moment, what we're seeing is companies bleeding because every qualified lead that dies in discovery, every AE faking confidence to hit a number that no one believes in, every CS handover that lands like a cold slap. It's just noise and trust leaking out the system, where we're trying to protect ourselves instead of perform. And this avoidance of constructive conflict, this avoidance of reality, looking for people who are going to validate your position rather than confront you, that's a hiding to nothing. And the cost isn't just in CAC or churn. It's the silence of your best people. You're going to notice it where they're just a little bit less responsive, receptive. They give a little bit less discretionary effort. And your stand-ups are tiring. The metrics that you present to the board, they know, they're just a fib. And you're just playing performance theater.
Exactly.
At what point do you have to say enough? And you actually take a bloody good long look in the mirror and you say, well, is it me? Is it us? Is it our process? Instead of blaming the people that we keep hiring and firing and they consistently fail, ask yourself the question, if this has happened more than 3 times, is it me?
I agree. But I have to share with everyone that I'm seeing over the last year, last 12 months, I'm seeing a positive trend, especially
in
with
Israel or
Israel.
everywhere?
In
Right.
Israel. in Israel. I'm seeing a positive trend. I think because of the situation, businesses, especially small startups, which they lack resources, they lack money. They're burning their investors' money, so they need to excel. They need to improve much faster than any other business, I guess. I'm seeing a positive trend in terms of what do we need to do in order to break those silos and stop wasting money on inefficient processes. And I'm seeing positive trends in terms of we need a better way of tapping into the business and understanding what works, what doesn't work. So I'm seeing this trend surfacing more and more. Businesses that are realizing that they need a sales analyst, not just an enablement guy, but someone more than just sales ops or revenue operations guy.
Okay, but you're still going to deal with the same problem, which is
Yep.
how do we get these people to change when the evidence is extremely clear, but they're attached to control, they're attached to the numbers because of the business model or how their investors report because of their context. Because it's possible, but if the organization stifles it, or the manager, for example, that you're working with is then beaten up by their boss, they're going to react to the reality of their day to day, and it's never going to sit. So,
I
how do we deal with that? Because that's the real issue here.
I think with numbers, with data. And as you started the conversation, I think that it's all a matter of, business impact. So if we can actually prove that if you continue with the current status quo, if you continue with the same, it's going to cost you more than you can afford, you can tolerate, and it's going to cost you your job as well. If you can quantify the impact of the current status quo, you've got better chances of changing something. But if you just stick to numbers without quantifying the impact, you're pushing the pedal down, but you're not moving anywhere.
And on that note, if anyone does want to quantify those numbers, either drop me a line or Avner a line. Both of us have the mechanisms to be able to give you the precise costs, what the ripple effects are. And again, I don't know Avner's model in detail, but we can ripple this out using historical data so that you can see through defunct companies, for example, how things played out before you use it on your live portfolio or your current company to see where the drift is and how to prevent it. I mean, if you know that it's going to cost you $250,000 a year, when do you want to stop that from happening?
Exactly. Can you tolerate it any longer?
Yeah.
Or do you want to stop it right now? Let's
Well,
stop.
what you're going to see if you're making these mistakes is you're going to see pipeline bloat. The middle will get constipated, and the close rates will start to get worse. CS teams will have to pick up on the promises that sales made, and that resentment will show through in fewer customers finishing the onboarding and activation and higher churn rates. You'll see
NDR, NR, exactly.
Yeah, you'll see the SDRs turnover, and you'll see significant inconsistency. So there'll be huge volatility in the pipeline. The quality will be poor. Marketing will be hitting their KPIs, but sales will not trust the leads. And you'll hear that in the conversations that you're having with your sales team and that ripple up. And then the conflict will mean that enablement is really busy, but completely ineffectual. And leaders are performing to belief while privately questioning everything. And you have meetings about meetings, no time to make the work flow, and nothing changes. And the board keeps asking why when no one is agreeing on what.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so we're coming into the end of this conversation. So now what I want to do is work on some practical stuff. What are the smallest, lowest risk tests that people in leadership can run to see whether or not they're falling foul of some of the stuff that we've been talking about? How can they go to the Gemba, get first party data, and observe what's really happening?
I think that, to begin with, and this is an area that is being neglected by most leaders because they rely on technology, but again, they don't leverage those technologies to full effect. I think that leaders need to spend more time and more efforts to understand what is going on in the early engagements, starting from pre-qualification of SDRs, BDRs, moving on to examining the handoff, whether it's effective or not. And I'm not just referring to the notes SDRs leave on Salesforce, but whether an actual handoff is happening, and reps leverage the data that SDRs provide them with in order to prepare and personalize the first engagement. And I'm not seeing personalization taking place, often. On the other way around, I'm seeing like a very generic flow across the board. I think leaders need to spend more time delving into the first engagement, examining the way reps perform their pain funnel discovery, and mostly examining whether reps are listening instead of just relying on their or sticking to their comfort zone, which is like show and throw, solution
Well,
review, etc.
part of the problem here, though, is that SDRs are often the most junior people, and we're asking them to try and engage with and have a conversation that captures the attention, attracts, activates a senior decision maker who is short on time and probably quite impatient because of they're just firefighting all the time. And we're not teaching them acumen. We're teaching them about products. We're teaching them about features and functions. And we're trying to get them to book meetings when no one in the history of humanity has bought your product, let alone bought a meeting because they want a meeting. They're buying it because they want an outcome and they want a better future.
Agree.
And I think this comes back down to most people haven't got a clue who their ICP is, and they haven't re-examined who their ICP is. So most of their marketing and most of their activity and most of their messaging is falling on fallow ground.
That I agree. That's why you need to separate between the two roles, SDR and BDR. And I agree, SDRs are entry level, and the process doesn't have to be that sophisticated. It doesn't have to be long. It could take like 5 to 7 minutes in order to book a meeting. But before you actually book a meeting, there are certain boxes you need to tick off as an SDR, which is at least you need to attempt trying to educate the prospect on what is it that we do. What does the business do in order to avoid a situation where the prospect meets with the account executive and 15 minutes into the call, the prospect says, I was probably under the wrong impression of what is it that you guys do. That's something that you can easily avoid if you build the right system to allow the SDRs to educate using one sentence the prospect very early in the process. Once you gain an experience as an SDR, then you can actually move up the ladder and become or act as a BDR. You've got more skills, you've got more confidence to challenge the prospect in terms of cold calling, cold emails, etc. And then those BDRs, experienced BDRs, they can move up the ladder they can transition into account executives or other roles in the
So
go-to.
effectively, you're saying there's a proper apprenticeship where they learn the craft.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm 100% with that. The one thing I would dispute, and I disagree with wholeheartedly, is why are we getting SDRs to call cold lists that marketing has not done a proper job of filtering for TAM so that only ICP are in that list? Because most of the SDR's time is spent speaking to people who cannot buy, will not buy, or should not buy.
I agree. This is a perfect timing because it happens to be that I'm meeting with so many businesses, trying to convince them that social selling or marketing, it's not necessarily the marketing's responsibility. I think that today, given the what happens with AI and what happens in the markets everywhere, I think that everyone needs to step in and take part in the process of educating prospect what is it that our business is doing, etc. In other words, I think that every customer-facing role, starting with sales dev, sales engineers, support, customer success, everyone is a marketeer. Everyone needs to step in.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Everything that you do that touches the customer is marketing, and every employee has responsibility for the brand, the financial health, and the reputation and the security of the business. Some people are specifically accountable for those things, but every single job description should have a window to the customer, and
This
they
is
don't.
music to my ears. I couldn't agree more.
Right. Okay. So let's take a step back. If you're going to design this from a blank sheet of paper and you're going to design it right from the outset, and we're going to start from defining the job.
Yep.
Okay. So the job of marketing is.
The job of marketing is marketing, brand awareness, etc. But on top of the usual stuff, on top of the
Those are
usual
functions. What's the outcome that marketing must fulfill?
brand awareness, brand recognition, competitive, ICP, personas, messaging, elevator speech.
So those are all functions. Let me define it the way I think it is. Marketing is anything that touches the customer.
Yep.
Therefore, marketing is accountable for creating the systems to ensure that customers for life are attracted, they are then converted, and then they are kept and expanded for life.
Agree.
That's marketing's function. And anything less than that, I think, is making a terrible mistake. And the second part of that is it all starts with the customer and you build everything out from there. Now, how much of the go-to-market function how much of the tech stack, how much of the security and the management and the IT could be wiped out completely if you adopted that approach?
Quite a lot, I would say.
So,
50%
yeah.
or around 40 to 50% to begin with.
So over a 4-month period, if you're able to save 40 to 50% of your monthly recurring losses and convert those into monthly recurring revenue compounded, how long does it take before you make the decision that maybe it's worth exploring just in case there's a better way?
I think it's a matter of 2 quarters max, in my opinion.
Well,
But there is another problem, and we're not here to talk about what works. We're here to talk about things that don't work, and as you said, uncomfortable conversations. So I think that the problem is, especially from an early stage startup point of view, we need to take into consideration that leadership are not here for the first time. They've been around. They've done their exit in one of their previous roles, and this is their second exit or second attempt to go public. And sometimes they're just putting stuff under the rug or covering up in order to make it to the IPO, whatever, in order to start again the process. Again, it's about politics and it's about other issues that unfortunately nurture those inefficiencies.
Well, what's really interesting, and if you're in PE, you really need to have a look at this, because the decisions that you are making, in all probability, will cause your fund to crash beginning of Q3, Q4.
The game is changing.
And we're seeing this, and I'm reckoning around 42% of all private equity funds will go into crisis by the end of Q4. And that will then trigger the next extraction event for the really big deep pockets like KKR and BlackRock that are going to be coming after your portfolio.
Yep.
And if you haven't sorted out this alpha drift before that crash happens, you can kiss your holiday home in Montserrat goodbye.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay. So tell me this then. We're trying to create alignment because everything that we've just talked about is about a siloed business where leadership is still thinking through their blinkered lens, where they think that they can control by looking at a balance sheet. What we know is that if the human beings within the process are not fully engaged, are not clear about the part that they play, and they are not working in complete alignment,
and not motivated,
and they are not, we are not tapping into the motivation that is an internal fire that only their managers coaching is going to be able to unlock. Okay, because people don't come to work for your reasons, they don't sell for your reasons, they don't exit for your reasons. So given that we know all of that, what are the first things that we can do to start creating awareness and commitment to creating alignment?
Become more human, or put more emphasis on the human factor to begin with.
Okay, get practical stuff. What can a leader do to develop this skill set that essentially they've got, but they're not really utilizing properly because the emphasis is on the finance, it's on the exit, the valuation?
I mean, if you sense there is a problem as a leader, if you sense there is a problem, try to address the human factor. Try to understand what is causing those frictions or bottlenecks or decline in performance before you wait for those reports, end of month, end of quarter reports. Try to understand whether there is a human factor that explains the decline in performance. We're all humans. I think that we need to managers and leaders need to put aside the sales performance KPIs and try to see whether there is there are other reasons that might explain the decline in performance. That's to begin with. On top of that, I would build a system that would provide me with the close to real time signals. So I wouldn't have to rely on those forecasting meetings once a week, which don't really give me a chance to understand what is going on, what goes wrong. Especially today with AI, and there are so many tools that gives you the eyes and ears that can explain the answers to those whys.
Can I just interject for a second? Calculate the cost of your forecast meeting. You've got 10 reps plus a manager, or so say 8 reps plus a manager. They need to generate 1.2 million a year. That's 500 an hour per person. Okay, so it's costing you $5 an hour to listen to people talk to a fiction and listen to people lie. How about we create the conditions where managers spend 3 minutes a day speaking to their reps and they always know exactly where they are? They have a system that allows them to interrogate the CRM and to know for certain where every single deal is and what actions need to be taken. And every single rep knows what actions they need to take in order to protect their accounts, advance, or exit cleanly.
Again, I couldn't agree more. And from my own experience, what I'm seeing is that sometimes you build a system for the sake of having a system. From a forecasting point of view, sometimes you're having those conversations in order to educate everyone that, hey, we have a system, you better do your job because we're going to meet next Monday, and you're going to see that I'm on top of things. As a manager, I'm using those forecasting meetings in order to tell everyone, I'm up to date.
If you're using forecasting meetings in order to tell everyone I'm up to date, that's great. But does that need to be in a meeting?
No,
Because I think meetings should be learning exercises where every time we meet, people anticipate it with eagerness, they come prepared, there's clarity in terms of what we are there to do. We do it, and then we agree actions like adults, and we commit to doing them, and then we report back what progress we have made so that we're always making progress from meetings instead of having the same meeting over and over again, much like a Groundhog Day.
I agree. I mean, today, given again the technologies with the evolution and emerging AI tools, I don't think any business need to rely on those traditional forecasting. Those systems and tools can actually replace those forecasting meetings. So by the time you make it to the forecasting meeting as a manager, you know exactly what worked, what didn't work, and you know why. Because we're not able to recruit the right stakeholders, because we're going with a single threaded approach. We are not engaging with all the stakeholders that we need to engage with. So you know the reasons, you have the information before you start those forecasting meetings. What happens in reality in those forecasting meetings, you get those excuses from reps. I didn't follow up. I forgot to follow up. He didn't answer me. I'm sending emails.
As if they're saying, I forgot to follow up, couldn't get through,
Yeah,
left voicemail.
exactly.
Right.
Do
Okay.
you really want to spend your time doing this?
Well,
Nobody.
let's define the job function of a forecast. Why do we forecast?
To be able to predict whether we're going to hit our quota or not. To be
In
able
order to?
sort of like risk management, to know whether we're going to have a problem reaching our goals or not. In order to
So that we can?
sorry,
So that we can?
build a business.
Okay. But why is it that what is it that the job is empowering us, the forecast is empowering us to do that without an accurate forecast, we are unable to execute?
Well, to begin with, we need to justify, or we need to explain to our investors, board of directors, the status quo. And without having a forecasting system, we're basically flying blind. And nobody likes that. So investors, what investors want is ROI. They want to see some return on investment. And if you're not able to explain that, you're going to lose your job.
And in your experience, how accurate are forecasts?
Not accurate. In most cases, they're not accurate.
Okay, what sort of variance do you see? 10%, 20%, 30%, 80%?
I've seen cases of 80% and I've seen cases of 20%. So the range is like 20 to 80.
Okay.
It's like very critical, very.
What I've just heard you tell me is that the single record of truth upon which the board is going to make investment and hiring decisions is entirely dependent on information that is at least 20 to 80% wrong, and that is then compounded throughout.
Housekeeping, depending on housekeeping.
So then that brings us back to the next really basic question. What is the job of the CRM?
To help you maintain the right snapshot of your business, to be able to make the right decision, to fuel decision-making processes.
Who is it meant to empower to make the right decision?
Leaders, revenue leaders.
Okay. Again, I have to disagree with you. If your CRM does not help your salespeople sell more often to more people more easily for more money, then your CRM has failed to do the job it was intended. The reporting is a nice byproduct, and it's very important, but most CRM is put in place without any real adaptation in order to give management the illusion of control, and it doesn't deliver the result intended. I remember when, oh God, who were they? They had they were one of the original CRM people, and they had this headquarters in Bracknell on the Peanut Roundabout, and there were well over 200 Porsches and Ferraris and all of that. And 86% of their customers reported back that the project had failed to deliver the outcome intended. That hasn't changed much in my experience.
So it has actually. I agree. I mean, the CRM itself, the purpose and the way we implement the selling motion or selling process with the CRM hasn't changed a lot. But given the rise of tools such as WalkMe or digital adoption, that has changed the game actually. Because from a business that implements digital adoption, you don't really care about what's underneath. You don't really care about whether you're using Salesforce today or HubSpot tomorrow. Because from a seller's point of view, you don't care about all of that. You care about the overlay. You care about um, using an application layer that simplifies the process of creating a price quotation without actually dealing with the CRM. So I think it's all a matter of decision. So if you, as a leader, if you acknowledge the fact that wrong implementation on the CRM might slow down the business because of those friction and too many steps to follow, navigating through too many pages and steps, whatever. If you acknowledge that and if you decide to bring something better on top of your CRM, then basically you remove that friction. You allow your reps to work more effectively. But most businesses don't actually see that this way.
This reminds me, I was working with a client and they had 17 different bits of technology for the sales, marketing, and CS team. And it was costing every rep 2 hours of lost productivity a day. So the GM built an Excel front end that sucked everything into the one place. And they recovered 100 hours of production a day, 500 a week, 2,000 to 2,500 a month at zero additional cost. It was a lot of work for him. But you've got to ask yourself the question, well, why are we spending this money on this technology? Why are we adding, not subtracting?
Wrong decisions, wrong mindset, and mostly because people don't know what they don't know. And I agree. I mean, it's not about adding another component or adding another technology to already complex ecosystem. And by the way, that's another trend that I'm seeing. Every business, regardless of the sector and industry, are trying to consolidate their technologies, trying to get rid of technologies, because eventually, whatever you bring in, you find yourself as a seller or as a leader working for the technology instead of having the technology working for you. In most cases, that's the situation. But again, there is a solution. But the problem is that, again, it's all a matter of leadership. I'm seeing this happening too many times. Leaders trying to solve a problem with more content, more processes, and more systems instead of getting rid of the process.
First thing, simple 5-step process. What's the outcome, the job that we are trying to accomplish, and how well are we tracking? If we're ahead, great, work out why. If we're behind, what's not working?
Yep.
Let's stop doing that.
But how do you know what's not working? Sorry for interrupting. In order to understand what's not working, again, you need to invest time and have someone to tap into the business and tell you exactly, give you the answers to those whys. Why we're not proceeding as expected, etc.
Absolutely. And you need the truth. What you don't need is performance theater or someone rubbing your ego or confirming your bias. What you need are facts. Now, once you've done that, then we have the next stage, which is how do we improve the process? Because the process must support the human beings to execute to the standard we intended. If they cannot perform that level, then we have to ask the question, why not? And then we look at, well, if it's not working, let's stop it. Then what does work? What works better and what works best? And test it. Test it in little sprints, little experiments, where any experiment is no big risk and you can bury your dead quietly without any egg on your face. And once you've worked out how to improve the process, then document it and then put it in stone, but always have it on review. Now, if you haven't looked at your ICP in the last 3 months, you are selling to the wrong people. If you have not reviewed your compensation in the last 6 months, chances are you're driving the wrong behaviors. If you haven't looked at the KPIs and the metrics that you measure and ask yourself the question, why is the needle not moving in the way that we want it to? And you haven't changed your KPIs or metrics, you're doing the wrong things. All of that is within your agency and control. You actually can choose to do something about it, or you can abdicate control and blame and whine and moan. So in wrapping up, what would be the best advice you can give to somebody just to start thinking, open their minds to the possibility that there's a better way? What's the simplest first step?
You actually said it yourself a few seconds ago. Be open. That's it. Be open to feedback, constructive feedback. Most leaders I've worked for were not that open. I would begin with, don't be afraid to have a second opinion, to hear another opinion. Don't be afraid to work with strong people. Bad managers, bad leaders are afraid of strong employees. So be open, surround yourself with talents and strong people. I'm not just referring to salespeople, I'm referring to everyone who supports the sales process. Don't be afraid to work with strong people who have their own opinion. It might work better. It might save your job. It might help you to scale your business. It might help you to generate more revenue and come back home with more money, more cash. Don't be afraid to have an
Go
open.
looking for evidence you're wrong.
Yeah.
But that takes vulnerability and that requires courage. And lots of leaders will struggle to do that because they think that they have to present this stony, impenetrable face to their people.
Yep.
My experience is completely different. The leaders who are vulnerable, the leaders who invite the opinions and listen to their people, get a lot further, a lot faster, especially in times of unraveling, as we are now. This is the end of an epoch. We've got 10 years of this level of uncertainty and volatility. In all probability, it will get worse in terms of trading conditions, hiring conditions, supply chains, risk, volatility.
Yep.
So surround yourself with really good people and create the conditions for them to be able to do their best work.
I think that that's not even optional because it's not an option because there is less money on the table. There are less investors, less PEs. The market is more demanding. And I mean, everywhere you look, every space, every sector, every industry is becoming more crowded every day, thanks to technology. So if it may work in the past, it doesn't mean that it's going to work in the future, whatever you used to do. Things have to change.
Well, when you see people behaving in a way that is customer centric, uses trust as the operating system, and focuses on creating alignment, being an ally to the customer, being an ally internally, creating good, smooth process, what level of quota performance do you see those people generating in this market today?
Overall, I think that they're performing better than those narrow-minded leaders with, being led by their ego.
But I'm talking about the actual individual contributors. What level of performance are their people hitting because the leaders have adopted this approach?
First of all, they stick around, they stick longer. They're motivated because they're being recognized, and that's, I think, one of the most important parameters that contribute to attrition or to the fact that people might stay longer and work with you as a manager. People are looking for recognition, so that improves recognition. That improves the stickiness, uh, and you get more. You get more from those people. You get more contribution, more proficiency, more contribution. If I didn't say that before, sorry. You get more from the same people. They are encouraged to work better, more efficiently, because they have a reason to do so.
Well, what I'm seeing is the people who have adopted this approach and been implementing it for at least 6 months are somewhere between 140 and 270% of quota, and they are closing 80% even from cold.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, it's not. It's predictable. It's systems and people committing to the system. That's what's amazing, that people are spending so much time and effort working harder than they need to produce 30% of their quota. So 27% was last year's average, wasn't it? Of the team that hit quota. So you can 10x the production and the outcome by just removing the fat, the friction, the uncertainty, and being humane. But you've got to stop and think. And therein lies the challenge. So if anyone does want to stop and think, then get in touch with Avner, get in touch with me, or get in touch with both of us, because we're actually working together on projects. So he brings his piece, I bring mine, and together we do stuff that was impossible on our own. So if you're curious, let's have a chat. Avner, let's have a wrap up from you. What one thing would you tell your 23-year-old idiot self that would have stood you in really good stead that you wish you'd learned and applied?
Be bold, creative, and don't be afraid to take decisions and jump into deep waters. You're not there to satisfy everyone. Just go with your dreams.
Absolutely. And again, learn how to make good decisions. Learn how to be an effective decision maker. If anyone wants help with that, again, we both have processes to empower you and empower your human beings to make good decisions well under pressure with limited information. So let's have some book recommendations. Obviously, they're your books. So The Multiplier. What else?
I've got the first one is the top sales enablement challenges. And I know that we're recording audio, but I'm having the book here with me. So the first one is the top sales enablement challenges that talks about the 15 core challenges that business leaders, CEOs, CLOs face when they're trying to build a sales ecosystem with or without a sales enablement guy by their side. I put together those 15 challenges in order to help them to avoid them as early as possible. The second book I published recently called The Multiplier talks about the role and responsibilities of sales enablement in today's economic climate. Again, avoiding the traditional approach and mindset of what does enablement contribute to my business? How do I put together an enablement function for my organization? How do I leverage enablement to full effect, etc.? And most importantly, how do I actually implement and deploy a multiplier mindset across the go-to-market ecosystem? And again, it doesn't just apply to the sales space, but I think that everyone needs to act as a multiplier. Every customer-facing role, everyone who is engaging with the customer, marketing, sales, customer success, finance, support,
operations.
Exactly.
Excellent. Lovely. Avner, how can people get hold of you?
Just look up Project Moneyball on Google or Amazon. Look up Multiplier or my name, Avner Baruch. You'll find my 2 books, and I'm working on my 3rd book. So hopefully by the end of this year, I'll have the 3rd book published and available on Amazon as well. And the usual, LinkedIn as well. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. Look up Avner Baruch or Project Moneyball.
Excellent. Avner, thank you so much.
Marcus, it's been a pleasure. Always happy to talk to you about, secret topics and having uncomfortable conversation. Looking forward to the next one.
Excellent. This is Marcus Kauke signing off once again for the Inquisitor podcast. If you would like to triage your ICP or your pipeline, get in touch. Take 3 to 5 minutes to be able to rapidly triage your pipeline and identify what's dead, what's dying, what's at risk. And you can do this without any pressure. So if you'd like to do that, get in touch, marcus@last-last.com, and ping me a subject line saying triage. In the meantime, stay safe and happy selling. Bye-bye.